Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and back with another Christmas card for my Christmas card series. So I laid down my Tonic craft mat onto my work surface. I'm absolutely loving this craft mat, mostly because it has that, one, it's more white, so colors show up on it if you press your ink into it, and two, it has like a silicone sort of backing to it, so it's not sliding all around my work surface. I love it. So I laid it out on my work surface, I guess I did end up needing it. You could do this over scratch paper too though. I have some distress watercolor paper here, just a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece. I've super sped this up. I wish I could sponge this quickly, although this didn't take that long. I have the textured side facing up, and I started with my lightest color. I just picked out almost like an ombre effect in shades of blue all the way to black, and I started with my lightest and my mini ink blending tool, and the lightest was Tumbled Glass, and that one I started right in the very center, and then all the other colors I started on the edges and kind of pulled them toward the center, working my way all the way to the darkest color. And I did have some scratch paper there regardless for some of the darkest colors, especially this black soot, because I didn't want to accidentally bring too much in and cover up everything. And I found the more ink I was adding, the easier the colors went on to blend. So once I was happy with how I had everything look, I took my Perfect Pearl powder in Perfect Pearl and my little Tonic scoop, because it just made it easier, and scooped just a very small amount onto an acrylic block. And then I added some water. So I've got just a little bit of shimmer going on here. And then I've got a paintbrush, and I'm just picking it up and tapping the brush against my finger to create a really fine splatter. And I pretty much use absolutely all of this water because it's pretty and I wanted to add a ton. Usually I would just splatter this with water and pick it up with a paper towel, but I added that Perfect Pearl to give it that shimmer, and when it hits the light, it's so pretty. So I got a couple blobs there, but I'm not too worried about it. So I got all of this done. I let it dry and I washed out my brush so there's no shimmer left in it. And then, of course, I pulled out my Copic Opaque White. I absolutely love this. It's so white. So same thing. Picked up a bit on my brush, put it on my acrylic block, watered this down just a bit with water to make it a little bit of a thinner consistency. And then I just flick the edge of my brush against the edge of the acrylic block to create this splatter. So it basically looks like either, snow or a night sky. And same thing, I pretty much used up all of the paint I had thinned out here and just added a ton of splatter to this. And then again, going to let this completely dry. So once that's dry, I've die cut the Oh Holy Night word die from some white cardstock. This is a die set from Simon Says Stamp. And then this one comes in basically kind of 3 different pieces. So the smallest one, the first time I pressed it into my Simon Says clear embossing ink pad. And then I just, holding it with my reverse tweezers, dipped it into Ranger's liquid platinum embossing powder. So of course the tweezers cover up, a portion of it, so it's missing its embossing. So then you dip it back in, and then dip it back in the ink pad, and then dip it back in the embossing powder, remelt it, etc. Honestly, this is not my favorite way to use it because you have to do this multiple times and move the tweezers each time. The tweezers can leave a mark. I end up struggling with it. It's easier with a larger piece. With a small one like this, it ends up I struggled with it. So what I honestly prefer to do is I like to take my die cut, whichever one it is, and with this I just cut a tiny, really thin little strip of that same heavyweight cardstock and added just a little bit of adhesive to one end, so I've got a little handle here. And then that way I can do the same thing, is press this into my ink pad and then coat it with the embossing powder. Now, I have had people ask me why not just emboss a larger piece and then die cut it. That 99% of the time it's going to make the embossing powder crack, the embossing crack after if you try embossing first and then die cutting. And I prefer doing it this way because it'll coat the edges as well, that have been die cut. So the embossing powder kind of curls around the edges a little bit. Plus, when you press it into the ink pad, it gets the ink on the edges. So it creates a much smoother effect. So I showed this more in the class I did for the online card classes, Crafted Kindness. I did a video for them and I embossed a bunch of sentiments with metallic embossing powders, and they turned out so pretty. They were so much fun. So I did it for that, and then I was in the mood when I was going through my embossing powder. I was like, ooh, I haven't used liquid platinum in so long, and I just love this. It is one of the prettiest embossing powders. So I just kept going along, kept reusing my little handle there. I was just very careful about removing the die cut piece after I had melted it with my embossing powder. And all of the pieces I did twice because some of the areas were a bit larger, so it helped smooth everything out. So it's just nice and glossy and metallic and fabulous. I love it. So that die set comes with the word die as well as the outline die. So the outline I die cut from vellum. And I'm going to adhere all of these pieces with some Ranger Multimedium Matte Adhesive. Just applying the adhesive mostly to the thicker areas of the sentiment. It doesn't have to be on everything. And then I'm going to fiddle around and get these adhered onto the outline. They've kind of warped a bit with the heat embossing, you know, and pressing into the ink pad and that. So I kind of had to fiddle with it to get it in place. And then press it down onto the vellum. And like I said, this is in 3 pieces. The O is separate, and then the 3 letters of night are separate, which actually kind of makes it easier to line everything up because you don't have to do it all in one piece. So got that all adhered. I'd even embossed the little dot to the eye. So got that adhered into place. And then I love it backed with vellum like this. I love that so many of these companies are releasing die cut sentiments with like little bubbles or outline dies and everything. It just gives it that little extra something. So I'd also die cut the Simon Says Holy Stars wafer dies from Simon's white glitter cardstock. And for the large one, I also die cut several pieces of just white cardstock from that same die because I wanted to back this with those just to give it that extra like weight and dimension. So same thing, I used my multimedia matte adhesive and made sure to apply it right to the very edges because this is like got very narrow tips on this star. So I wanted to make sure they were adhered down really well. And I ended up backing it with 2 pieces of heavyweight white cardstock die cuts. So just pop that onto my splattered and sponged card front here. And with that Ranger Multimedia Matte Adhesive. And then for the sentiment, I actually took one of my Derice foam strips. And these strips are already really narrow, but I cut it in half. So it's I have these 2 very, very thin, narrow strips of foam tape. And I'm only going to apply these again to the thickest area of the sentiment behind the vellum here. Because 1, that'll hide the adhesive, and 2, it's not necessary to apply, you know, foam tape around the entire sentiment. That would, again, take forever. Ain't nobody got time for that. So I just applied little pieces of these little foam strips on the thickest areas of the sentiment, keeping the one spot clear where the bottom of the star is. So I was just like holding it up, seeing where that star is going to be so the foam tape doesn't get in the way of that. And then applying my foam strips to all of the thicker areas of this sentiment. So once I've got all those into place, I can press that onto my card front over this die cut star here. And I had kept the background, like I had said, it was 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I kept it as is. I did think about die cutting it, but I loved how it was just a solid piece. So for my card base, I have heavyweight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11, scored it at 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. And then for the inside, I pulled out the Happy Christmas stamp set. I used this on a previous video this year for my Christmas cards. So there was a sentiment in it that was perfect with the star and the outside sentiment. So I pulled that out and I used my anti-static powder tool on the inside of the card, stamped the sentiment with that same clear embossing ink, and then used that Ranger liquid platinum embossing powder and melted that with my heat tool. So once I've got that melted, I had die cut the smaller star from the Holy Stars wafer dies from that same white glitter cardstock. So I'm going to add my multimedia matte adhesive to that and then just kind of stick that right there against the sentiment on the inside of my card just to finish that off. So then to adhere my card front to my card base, I'm just running my ATG adhesive all the way along the perimeter and then running some down the middle so that this is going to adhere really well to my card front. And get that completely lined up because that will cover the complete card base completely. And then as a final embellishment, of course, I had to add some sequins. So I pulled out my Pretty Pink Posh Sparkling Clear Mix sequins and kind of laid a few out onto my card front here. And then once I was kind of happy with the placement, I'm going to use my Crystal Katana to pick up the sequins, put down little dabs of that same multi-medium matte adhesive, and then press those into place. And that's going to finish off my card for today. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to all of the supplies used. So if you're interested in any of that, you can check out my blog post, which is the first link directly below the video. I'll also have the links in there as well. So check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.